Before we get started, make sure you like, comment, subscribe to help me out with the algorithm. Also, follow my socials down below and join my Discord. And while you're down there, please check out my memberships by the join button next to the subscribe button and see if that piques your interest. Thank you.
War crimes against medics. As a way to alleviate some of the horrors of combat, social convention and international law make some individuals on the battlefield off limits to deliberate targeting. Very often, however, in the heat of battle, these conventions are ignored, and those
Yeah. A lot of the time, it's on purpose. If medics are killed, I'm pretty sure. But I think the reason is for this. It's under under the Geneva Convention, right? Or something. One of the. Well, it's against the rules of war, which is crazy. When I found out that wars had rules, like in my mind, that's just crazy. But it's fairly recent stuff. Like obviously, modern wars have rules, but like in the past, yeah, there weren't no rules. I mean, you tell the Vikings not to do certain things, yeah, they're probably not gonna listen. They're gonna pillage and uh, grape stuff.
who should be off limits are intentionally targeted. Rules and customs of war date back centuries. By the 18th century, the majority of the officer class in an
Wait,
army
really?
would be
Okay, okay. I knew it was like I thought I knew a little bit about this. Apparently, I know less about this than I initially thought.
made up of the aristocracy, men of wealth and privilege. These individuals would often attempt to conduct war in a gentlemanly fashion. One of these involved the
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course, yeah. That's why pretty much why the British kind of lost the Revolutionary War. I think that's what it was called. The War of Independence. Sorry, Revolutionary War. Because they fought within certain rules, whereas like the colonies fought guerrilla tactics, and that's what gave them the upper hand. Which is also funny because later on down the line they would they would go up against Vietnam, who fought in guerrilla tactics, and they lost.
treatment of enemy officers in battle. The deliberate shooting of officers was considered barbaric and to be avoided.
I don't know what. We'll leave
During
it
the
in.
American Revolution, while it was never official policy to target officers, the Continental Army did create a unit of sharpshooters who made use of highly accurate long-range rifles.
What? Don't target officers? That was the rules? Just shoot the cannon fodder. That's it? Holy heck.
Giving them the ability to pick specific targets, as opposed to their regular army counterparts, who were armed with much less accurate smoothbore muskets. Under the command of frontiersman Daniel Morgan, these rifles played a decisive role at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. According to legend, one of his men, Timothy Murphy, under Morgan's orders, deliberately shot and killed British General Simon Fraser. Morgan's other men also targeted other officers and artillerymen, throwing the British advance into confusion, allowing the Continental Army to win the battle. Exactly what did happen is a bit vague, but Fraser and the other officers were definitely targeted by American sharpshooters, giving the Continental Army a decisive advantage. While there was never an official policy to target such individuals, those with the means to do so were more than willing to seek out officers for special attention, no matter how barbaric it may seem. Hey everyone, it's Chris Kane. Have you ever found yourself staring into the abyss of a blank wall, craving a hint of culture? Enter Displate, a mixture of 51% art, 46% tech wizardry, and a sprinkle of about 3% magic. And behold, it's metal, like literally metal. A veritable treasure trove of designs await you, from Star Wars to Marvel, all captured on this slice of industrial art. The pièce de résistance is magnets. You can go from holding it to hanging it in a mere 20 seconds. It's like an exercise in simplicity, like breathing, but with better wall decor. Did I mention that each purchase supports the earth in a very literal way? For every displate you buy, a tree gets planted, a real oxygen-producing tree. Purchase and plant in one fell swoop. Want to
Okay, that's. I don't want to like like dunk on his sponsorship, but this whole planting a tree thing for every display, dude, you're doing barely. You're doing something, obviously, but you're not doing much. You're really not doing much. There's so many trees in the world, and they account for like a small amount of oxygen going into the air. It's the companies that use this is just marketing. That's all it is. You plant a single tree for every package, yeah, sure, but you're not really helping too much for the environment. You're helping a bit, sure, but it's like adding an extra person to push over the Empire State Building, and like, what is that extra person going to do, really?
discount? Click the link in the description. 1 to 2 displates are 20% off. 3 plus displates are 30% off. Your future self will thank you. Over the years, restrictions on targets were formalized into official treaties. One of the most prominent of these restrictions is the prohibition of medics and medical personnel as legitimate targets. Some nations, however, not only refused to acknowledge these international guidelines, but also made the deliberate targeting of medics a standard tactic to be used by their armed forces. Two treaties that govern the conduct of soldiers on the battlefield are the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention. The latter is a series of agreements
Ooh, I
dating
know
back
that
to
one.
1864, which governed the conduct of soldiers on the battlefield. It was updated in 1906, 1929, and most recently
18, 18 what?
agreements dating back to 1864, which governed the conduct
64.
of soldiers on the battlefield.
That's way longer than I thought it was. What the hell? I do not know my history. I remember brushing past it. The main focus was just the war itself, really. The acts and petitions, conventions, stuff like that was kind of like a footnote in um in our history lessons. A bit like the War of Independence for America. It was kind of like, yeah, they were with us, and then they weren't. That's about
Battlefield.
it.
It was updated in 1906, 1929, and most recently in 1947. Though additions have been made and the exact wording of the treaty has changed over the years, any deliberate attack on a medic or medical personnel, or any unnecessary hindrance in the performance of their duties is considered a war crime and can be
Ooh.
prosecuted accordingly. Furthermore, medics are not to be taken as prisoners of war. Should one be captured, he should be returned to friendly lines as soon as practical, and no distinction is to be made between military medical staff and civilians. Temporary auxiliary medical personnel, such as stretcher bearers and those who transported wounded or sick soldiers, are also considered non-combatants, while performing their duties and given the same consideration as designated medics. Medics are allowed to carry weapons for personal protection or to defend the wounded under their care without forfeiting their status as a non-combatant. However, should the medic engage in offensive combat alongside other soldiers, he would forfeit his immunity and be treated like any other soldier. For the most part during World War II, medics did not carry weapons, though there were some exceptions. To ensure these personnel are easily
That oh, that's a tricky thing. It's like, do you give the medics like guns for them to protect themselves, but they have but like the rules say that they'll become combatants if they use it. which is also weird. They're medics, or do you make it a strong rule where like medics just don't get guns anyway, but then that puts them in danger? That's so weird. It's a fine line, man, to like toe, and it's like they shouldn't really be carrying guns, but it's one of those things where like they kind of should because it's for protection, really. Like, yeah, the fucking drunk driving is illegal, but people do it. You know that type of deal. Like, it might be against the rules, but someone's gonna shoot them. Someone's gonna just kill
Identified
them.
to ensure their protected status, many nations would mark them with special symbols, most often a red cross on a white background. This symbol would be
Yeah, this is why this is like the symbol is uh I think it's a symbol, right? The red cross. It's like copyrighted. You can't use it in games or stuff like that. You can't commercialize it at all.
displayed on tents, vehicles, as well as helmets and armbands as a quick visual reminder of the special status of the bearer. During World War II, most major powers were signatories of the conventions, including the United States, Great Britain, and Germany. By and large, these nations respected medics and avoided deliberately shooting them while they tended to the wounded. There were some exceptions to this. For example, some SS units would intentionally wound enemy soldiers. When medical aid arrived on the scene to treat the casualty, the SS soldier would fire on the medic, hopefully killing him. There are also
That's so cruel, man. That's so. It's yeah. They definitely need weapons, but that's. This is why we have rules, man. Dude, that's just. That's just cringe, man. What the hell? You're trying to save lives and you
incidents of Allied soldiers firing on German medical personnel
freaking Nazis, dude.
in clear and deliberate violations of the Hague and Geneva Conventions. While there are many examples of this happening on both sides, for the most part, the non-combatant status of the medics was respected on the Western Front. Medics would often tend to soldiers of either side. In one example, a pair of American medics used a French
I
church
guess it happened on both sides, both assholes, but yeah, it's one of those things where like if the person feels like they can get away with it, they'll probably do it.
as an aid station on D-Day, 1944. Wounded soldiers from both sides were given the same treatment. The only restriction was that all patients had to leave their weapons outside. Both American and German soldiers' lives were saved due to their intervention. On the Eastern Front, the situation was entirely different. The Soviet Union did not sign the Geneva Convention, and the Hague Conventions were signed by Russia in 1899 and 1907, with the Soviet Union never confirming its status as signatory, which provided the justification for Nazi mistreatment of both prisoners and medical staff. When in combat, medics would be treated like any other soldier and would be
Oh
eliminated
man.
without hesitation. Should a
Oh, it's one of those where like it's it's cringe they're doing it, yeah, because they're medics, they're meant to help. But I know I'm gonna sound completely unhinged. It's just one of those things where like it forces other nations to sign that convention, because otherwise this is the outcome. You're not gonna have any soldiers, any medics to like help your wounded at all. You're just not. Yeah, you can do the same back to them. Sure, but like it's probably best for you to sign it to where like you can at least minimize the amount of medics that get killed, because obviously there's going to be one or two of those people who are going to be like, I can get away with this, and obviously there's like accidental fire. Yeah, someone's like in the heat of the moment accidentally shooting a medic, but everyone's going to be alert now. Like, don't kill medics. You're going to get completely destroyed by the by the court system.
Soviet medic be captured, he would be sent to a POW camp as any other soldier. Conditions in these camps were horrendous, with the Nazi regime deliberately underfeeding Soviet POWs. The main aims of the German war effort in the Eastern Theater of the War was Lebensraum, or living space, for
Yeah,
ethnic
I
Germans.
remember that
As
word, man. I remember that term very much. We talked about it like non-stop. Um, and plus in my history class, it was the head teacher, so like technically, I could not slack off Al. He would come down on everyone hard.
a result, treating the Soviets, be they
He was so passionate about history, though. It was actually like a good class to be in. Like even though like you couldn't really slack off, you kind of just wanted to learn anyway.
medic, prisoner, or any other protected class with utter contempt, flew in the face of the Nazi ideology. In response, Soviet soldiers also didn't respect German medics or medical personnel. The war on the Eastern Front
Yeah,
was one of untold
double-edged
brutality,
sword.
with both sides committing atrocities against the other with no regard for international law. Across the globe in the Pacific theater of the war, another military would make the killing of medics a priority. As the United States and other Allied powers conducted their island-hopping campaign, it was soon apparent that the non-combatant status afforded to those in medical fields was not applicable. Although the Empire of Japan did sign the Hague Convention in 1907, and it also signed the Geneva Convention.
Of course, Japan, man. Holy heck. They're crazy, man. It's all about that honor thing. It's very. It's just
Convention of
that
19
it's one of those like you're stuck in a rock and a hard place with like Japan because they're like crazy, honorable, really willing to die for. So the like the allies. I mean, the whole storming the beach thing. Like a lot of them knew they were probably going to die on that beach. That was just a given, and it's crazy that they just went anyway. It's one of those things where, like, to be honest though, they would have gotten shot or like arrested, but most likely shot by senior soldiers for deserting. Damn, we live in a good era, man. Let me tell you that. Like we were born in the right year.
1929, but it didn't ratify it. Japanese leadership believed that upholding the treaty would encourage the Americans to bomb Japanese cities, as any captured airmen would be treated as legitimate POWs rather than war criminals, which was what the Japanese considered them to be. As a result, the provisions of the conventions were ignored. While on campaign, many medics found themselves the subject of special attention from their Japanese.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, you have like people sending the documents to the conventions to not target you, but that just puts a bigger target on those who like just want to like minimize the amount of help that you get that you
Foes.
give
The
your
red
allies.
cross on a white background that was worn on both
Yeah,
helmets and
man.
armbands, symbols that in other theaters provided a degree of protection, did little more than single out the wearer as the subject of special attention. Medics and corpsmen would remove these insignia and wear the same uniforms as their comrades, as any feature that distinguished them as medical personnel would only put their lives in unnecessary risk.
That's one way to do it.
Additionally, medics and corpsmen in the Pacific Theater would routinely carry weapons and fight alongside their comrades. Though it was a direct violation of the Geneva Convention, there was little point in following its rules,
Yeah,
as the enemy didn't respect the convention anyway. Army medic and Medal
I mean, damned if you do, damned if you don't,
of
man.
Honor recipient Desmond Doss noted the Japanese
Oh
obsession
yeah,
for
Hacksaw Ridge. Just one more. Please, God, help me get one more.
attacking medical personnel. In one interview after the war, he stated, quote, "To them, the most hated men in our army were the medics. They would let anybody get by just to pick us off. They were taught to kill the medics for the reason that it broke down the morale of the men, because if the medic was gone, they had no one to take care of them. All the
Yeah.
medics were armed, except me." End quote. As Doss states, the main reason for targeting medics was to harm American morale. Should a soldier be wounded, it should be the actions of a medic that would be the difference between life and death. Should the medic be killed or otherwise incapacitated, there would be no immediate aid for any other wounded soldier. For centuries, the designation of legitimate and illegitimate targets has been enforced both as a social convention and in formal treaties. In spite of this, many have simply ignored these restrictions in order to gain an advantage on the battlefield.
Yeah, it's sad really that you need rules, but then people are not going to follow them. Some of them are just not going to follow them. Um, but you need them in place. And the only way to kind of like enforce that is if multiple countries agree on those rules and they can like come together to like either sanction or punish their country that doesn't follow those rules to and you kind of need to be a superpower to do that, really, or like allied with like bigger superpowers, just kind of like the UN. But yeah, that was a fun video. Uh, Big shout outs to my members, Josh Byrne, Main, and Skull Skull.